Want to make sure you can see my screen there, the presentation and everything.
Getting the presenter's view, if you want to switch that to the presentation view.
Can you say it one more time?
We're seeing the presenter's view, so it's not like just the slideshow. So I think if you go up to display settings, it should be like on the top.
Like that?
Yeah,
Okay. Do you
there
see
you
the
go.
normal presentation there?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's cool.
Perfect. All right. Well, we'll get started then. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is James Bianco. I'm a former student of Scott Christensen's, currently undergrad student at the University of Missouri, and going to be going over this open source intelligence workshop today for you. So we'll just get started. You'll see open source intelligence commonly referred to as OSINT. That's just the shorthand nomenclature for it. And essentially, what OSINT is it's the use of publicly available information to kind of investigate things such as, location, um, people, stuff like that. It can be the work of one person or it can be the work of crowdsource. I've seen both. And while it is challenging, it is something that can be learned. Really, honestly, at the end of the day, it's just something that takes time and a bit of effort. So it's not impossible to do. So, kind of already went over this a little bit, but OSINT is used to identify people, it's used to identify places, and it's used to identify objects. Um, there's very common uses right now that I'll go over later. But here's an example for from more traditional media, such as the New York Times. Uh, there was a story a couple months ago where basically there was an explosion at a hospital in Gaza, and the New York Times used OSINT to investigate, where it occurred, where the launch happened from, that the rocket came from, basically, and where it might have landed, and using social media where they could see all these different videos that people had took and just posted online. They were able to figure out, exactly where the rocket went, where it exploded. You could see kind of in the bottom right there all these overlapping views, right? Um, and so, using all those different overlapping views, they were kind of able to see, where the midair detonation was and all that stuff too. So, it's, very useful as far as conducting an investigation in journalism. So, this is a very famous example here. There's a uh, investigative journalist organization called Bellingcat. And basically, Bellingcat became famous because they did a lot of work starting in 2014, where they actually identified, if you remember, MH17 was shot down in Ukraine. And initially, Russia had blamed Ukraine and the United States for it. They used a whole bunch of different misinformation tactics, and basically they proved without a shadow of a doubt that not only was this a Russian launcher, not even just a Ukrainian rebel launcher or something like that, they also were able to track all of its path back to Russia, down to where it went back to at its home base and the Russian unit that fired the missile. So they were able to do all that, um, again, using social media as a tool, right? So if you look here, you could see um, the missile trail, right? So they identified the location of that, and by doing that, they could see, okay, well, it was in rebel controlled territory, so there was no way for Ukraine to have been able to fire the missile from that area, right? So immediately after this happened, Russia moved the launcher back into Russia, And to be clear, this didn't require any prior military knowledge. They didn't need to know the intricacies of how a missile launcher works or anything like that. While some of the people on the team might have had that knowledge, they didn't need that knowledge. They just needed to figure out locations, and that is basically what this whole thing is about, right? So again, they were able to use Russian social media to kind of figure this out. There's a platform called VKontakta or VK, and basically they combed through over 200 soldiers' social media profiles, and by doing so, because people post a lot of information online, they were able to track the entire path back to Russia and back to the home base. And for more on this, and this will be included later, you could see Bellingcat's investigation here. I included the links just for the sake of you being able to see the whole thing. Um, Now, OSINT, while a lot of it is crowdsourced, it isn't just for journalists. You don't need to be a part of a big media organization to do this kind of stuff. While it might be helpful and it might save time, there's a lot of people in the Twitter sphere, and also known as X, that do this stuff regularly, and a lot of them have actually been quoted in traditional media articles, like that New York Times article originated from a group called GeoConfirmed. Um, Basically, they're just a group of volunteers from around the world that enjoy geolocating videos. There's a guy also on Twitter. His name is Justin Pettin. He goes by Intel Crab. He's just a college student, and he's been quoted in various traditional media articles as well. There's a group called Oryx, which I believe they're based in Turkey, and they're also a group of volunteers, and they essentially comb combat footage to track losses in Ukraine of equipment. And they've actually been shown. There was a story a couple months ago where um, intel had leaked from the U.S. military, where they were tracking the same information, and they were using Oryx as a source for a lot of their information. So it just goes to show that anybody could really do this. You don't have to be a part of the military to do it. Um, Here's another example too: is a guy named Covert Cabal. He kind of does the same thing, just an amateur analyst, and covers a lot of conflicts as well. So you know, I mentioned this prior. Oryx often cited when talking about Russian military losses or Ukrainian military losses. They go through every single picture and video, try to identify what the piece of equipment is, whether it's blown up or abandoned, and kind of give an overall tally essentially. And that kind of is helpful for knowing how long the war might continue, how the state of either country's military, stuff like that. And I mentioned Covert Cabal earlier. He actually, now this is a bit of an extreme example, but he actually purchased satellite imagery, which you could also do, and individually counted all the tanks that Russia still has in storage. So, again, it's a bit of an extreme example, but it just kind of goes to show you what you could do you know, at the tip of your fingertips, right? Um, you could do a whole lot just with open source information. You just have to be willing to find it. And GeoConfirmed, I also mentioned prior, they're well known for debunking Russian misinformation. There was actually, commonly, unfortunately, tweets by the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs that uh, they like to tweet stuff like, as you can see on the screen here, is basically they accused the Ukrainians of firing a gun at a woman and child, but they were able to prove based on just the location alone that it couldn't have been the Ukrainian military because it's nowhere near Ukrainian controlled territory, right? So stuff like that is why OSINT is very useful. So there's also some dangers of OSINT, right? So, as always, trust but verify. And OSINT usually comes with some form of bias, of course, especially when it comes to involving some sort of conflict, if you're covering a conflict and you're from that area, probably going to be some form of bias. And you have to keep in mind whoever's posting the information might not always be the most truthful person. So you got to be careful of that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of disinformation online, especially nowadays. Russia and Iran and China are well known for starting misinformation campaigns, and that's how a lot of this stuff gets out there. But you know, again, trust but verify, and you have to be careful, especially when covering conflicts too, is because this could have real world consequences. A lot of times you'll see that whenever a military posts, whether it's B-roll footage or anything like that, they often blur out the background because they don't want the location to be identified. Uh, a lot of militaries have realized this kind of stuff is important. Is no exceptions. Russia is a huge user of this kind of information, is why there was a whole campaign last year where Ukraine essentially urged silence around its upcoming counteroffensive, and arguably is part of why it actually ended up failing is because so many people were posting about it online. It was impossible to keep secret, right? It's actually a crime now in Ukraine to post about military movements. And I believe there's a couple other countries that have laws on the books as well. And there's that old saying, "Loose lips sink ships" for a reason. But as far as that goes, I guess it kind of begs the question: is, well, should this stuff be legal or should it be illegal? Because it does have real world consequences. That's kind of up to you to decide. But again, there has been instances in the past where people have been hurt or killed, unfortunately, because of stuff being released like this. So always have to be careful of the stuff that you're covering. So basically, we're going to kind of go over how to get started today, the very basics here. Google Maps always going to be the number one source of information, right? It's generally how people, scroll through finding these locations. While it might take hours to do, some, Google Street View is always going to be your friend, especially satellite view too. Satellite view is actually, I believe, where they got this image from. Bellingcat did. So it's going to be your friend when doing this kind of work, right? So GeoGuessr is just kind of for practice, and we'll go over a couple examples of that too in a minute. It's really just a fun game to play, but it kind of hones your location identifying skills. So then Bellingcat, they have a ton of useful guides. Goes step by step for a lot of this in really good detail. Um, everything from identifying shadows to identifying people. They have basically all of it on their website for free. So it's a really, really good resource. And they have even if they didn't have that, they have a lot of really good stories that rely on OSINT as well too. Then a good tool as well is called EXIF Viewer. It's essentially a picture data tool, and for those of you who do not know, there is a lot of data that can be garnered by just the photos you post alone. Not everything is scrubbed when you post it. So just the raw picture, if I were to take a picture right now from my phone and send it to somebody, they can gather a whole lot of information just from the data and the background of that picture, right? Not even talking about the location, they could talk about, the date that it was taken, um, sometimes the coordinates that it was taken at, depending on how the picture was taken. All that information you could kind of extract from EXIF Viewer. Now, sometimes people scrub that if they know how, or some websites do it manually or automatically rather themselves. Sophia, you had a question?
Yeah, so I'm guessing if could you go into a little bit more detail about like, is that what the metadata, like I feel like I've heard the term metadata a lot.
Yeah.
So is that considered metadata? And then also, do you know if maybe that's something like you said that you can scrub it? There's services to scrub it, but can you also replace it with false data? Is that something that's possible? Sorry, that's my question.
Um, yeah, I do believe the common term for it is metadata. I've heard it called multiple different things. And yeah, like you can scrub it, although as far as replacing it, I think you can do that, but I honestly not entirely sure if I'm sure there are services out there to do so. But if there are, I'm not aware of any. And I don't think it's something that you could just, go into the picture and change it or anything like that. Um, you would probably have to, you know, use a tool in order to do that essentially. So it's not something that the average person can just really do themselves or would know how to do, right? Um, so hopefully that answers your question.
Yep, no, that's perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So another really good tool is Maltego. Now I believe this is a paid service, but as far as you know, OSINT tools. This is a fantastic one. It essentially finds connections between email addresses, IP addresses. There's going to be a later workshop where we go over identifying people, and really, this would probably be a top tool to use as far as doing so because it kind of shows where email addresses are being used, and it's just a fantastic tool. And as far as images go, again, there's a really good website called TinEye where it's just basically a reverse image searcher. Um, Basically, you just plug the image in there and it scrubs the internet for seeing if it's ever been used anywhere on any website before, as long as it's a public one. And so honestly, that's usually where you should start first of all, because it's again good way of identifying misinformation. I've seen, recently Iran attacked an Israeli military base, right? And people were using pictures of a war that happened 5 years ago or something like that, or a gas explosion, and claiming that it was from an Israeli military base. So always reverse image search first, essentially, because if you're trying to identify a location, find out later that it has nothing to even do with what you're trying to investigate, then you just wasted a whole bunch of time. So TinEye, at the end of the day, will save you a ton of time. And there are tools, I believe, to reverse image search videos. It's just usually I think those are paid services. Image search is the most common one that you'll find. So unfortunately, videos are a bit more complicated. So we're gonna kind of go over an example here. I found this. I took this picture from Google Images, so I do know the location of this. But we're gonna try to figure out where it is collectively here. So, if you see anything that might be useful information, you feel free to shout it out. I could already see a couple things that would be helpful to potentially try to identify where this image was taken, but I want to hear from you guys. See if you could point anything out that might be useful for identifying the location.
Looks like that's an American stop sign
Yep.
somewhere in America.
Yep. So yeah, really good. You know, I'll point out a couple of things in a second here, but kind of as far as identifying this location, kind of just go back to what you already would know, right? There's a image that I actually found from the OSINT subreddit on the website Reddit, which is another really good resource. It's basically an amateur forum where they discuss all this stuff, and it's kind of like a passion project for all of them. But it's a picture of almost every license plate in the world. Okay. So this is a good tool to have. Uh, Not that you might not already know where that license plate is from, but if we look here, the reason I pointed that out is because there's a license plate vaguely in the image. You can kind of see the general color of it. And as Sophia pointed out, there's the stop sign, right? That's, I believe they mainly have that in the United States. That would they look like that? And if you didn't see that, there's also the American flag there. That is kind of a good giveaway as well that this is in the United States. And then you could vaguely make out kind of logo if you look above the stop sign there of a business, right? So kind of need to dig deeper here. You're obviously not going to just know where to search in the United States based off the image alone. It's the United States is massive, simply put. You're never going to be able to just figure it out based on what you just saw, right? So, what do we know about who posted the image? I posted this image, and you can ask yourself, what social media do they have public? Again, social media is the biggest way to figure out how to identify locations. And then you need to ask yourself, what can we gather from what has been posted publicly, whether it's other people, whether it's this person, etc. Right? I don't believe we have a question in the chat here. Oh, uh, Faisal figure it out. Yeah, well, okay, you figure it out. That's really good. But we're gonna kind of go over here just for the sake of how you normally go over this, right? But good job. Yes, that is correct. Um, so
I'm curious, how did you figure that out? Would you feel comfortable putting some of the things you space out, some of the hints that gave it away, or background information?
yeah, if you'd like to share.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sophia. Thank you so much. Thank you for talking to you again. And thank you, James, for a great presentation. So I use Google Image as a image search of Google Image to identify the locations. Yeah.
Uh, was there anything that gave away the most? Was it the business there in the background, or?
Yeah, because I was sure that because of the US flag and also US style stop sign, and
Mhm.
also the types of streets and buildings, and also and when I search on Google of the United States, and also I search and they gave me the exact street of this location also as well from Illinois.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah, that's exactly how you would do it normally. Ideally, in a perfect world, it is this simple, and that's why I was use something that was this simple. Unfortunately, in Google Maps, oftentimes too the license plates are blurred out, so it's a bit more difficult to figure out, and again too, the difference between this image and going back and trying to identify, say, the image with the vehicle in it, or identifying, based on the picture where the launch site is at. It's a bit more difficult. But so that's why we would go a little bit more in depth of trying to figure out where the person is from as well, right? So, but really good stuff I saw. That's really good. So kind of gonna dig deeper here too. So again, what do we know about the person who posted it? I posted it. My name, James Bianco, right? So if you go and just Google my name, you can find my social media, and you can see on LinkedIn that I have a profile, right? You can see where I go to school. You can see a whole slew of information. People post quite a bit online, more than they often realize, right? So if you look, I also posted where I went to high school, where I went to community college, where I currently go to college, all that good stuff. Okay. So, what have we figured out so far? We know it's probably in a small town, right? We know it's probably based on the United States. We know based that it's in the United States, there'd be an American license plate. So, has vaguely Illinois looking plates based on the color. I would know that it's an Illinois looking plate just by looking at it because I've seen them all my life. We know the person who posted it, me, James Bianco. We know where I went to high school, which is in Palatine, Illinois, right? And we could see that the picture seems to be in the downtown area of a small town. We could see train tracks running through the area, right? So if we look here, see the train tracks there. Um, it's very downtown looking area of a small town, especially if you're from the Midwest, that'd look very familiar to you. Um, so all good information to know, right? So that's kind of how we would run through it and figuring out where the location might be. Now, you might ask yourself, well, okay, I go to the University of Missouri, why wouldn't it be there? And that's a good point, but Palatine, Illinois is a much smaller town than Columbia, Missouri is, which is a city. So we could pretty easily eliminate that based on the fact that number one, there is no train tracks running through Columbia, Missouri, and there is no downtown area that looks like this. And again, this looks like a more of a small town downtown area, right? But yeah, really good stuff I saw. That's you're exactly right. This is in fact Palatine, Illinois. Um, and yeah, this is the downtown area of it. And it unfortunately this is a little bit blurry, but you'd be ideally you could just look up that business location above the stop sign, and this would make it way more easy for you. And just automatically bring you right to the location, but it's again not always going to be that easy. So we are going to play a little game called GeoGuessr. Want to make sure I'm going to stop sharing for a second and see. Then you can see my screen here. Can you all see this?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So we are going to play the free daily game. You get 3 free rounds of this. There's also a paid subscription for it, but we're just going to do the free version. So we are going to try to figure out where in the world this is, right? So if you see anything that might be helpful, shout it out. I can already see on here this is Spanish speaking country. I'm going to guess this is probably somewhere in Central South America. Let's see, there's a dog on the street there. Okay. See mountains. All right, let's go down the street here. And again, if you have any guesses or anything that might be helpful, feel free to shout it out. And again, unfortunately, you can kind of see here that the license plates are blurred, so it's that would make it a lot easier too. But unfortunately, it is not, in fact, that easy. So, okay, we can see it's Lento on the street there. We can see a sign. Right. Oop, go back there. Try to see what that says. We're going to cheat here for the sake of how you normally would do that. When you do GeoGuessr, it is cheating to just look at the signs, but we are going to just look up where Los, whatever that is. I'm not going to try to pronounce that. I don't want to butcher that. Okay, well that's not helpful, unfortunately. But I'm going to guess somewhere in Mexico. Yep. Oop. And it was in unfortunately not anywhere near there. It is a 2 minute game, so you have a little bit of time to figure it out. But there's I always like giving this example because there's a guy well known on YouTube and social media. He basically can figure this stuff out within like 1 second not even having to look around. It's actually kind of incredible. He will see the dirt and be like, "Oh, that looks like Argentinian dirt," and it's I always think it's kind of funny. But we'll try another round here, see if we can figure it out. Okay, go down the street. Not a whole lot of stuff we could gather from this. There's water here, wide open area. Okay, see if we can see a sign here. Fortunately, sometimes it's a lot more difficult than others, and it's not doing us any favors, not showing any signs. But again, if you have any guesses here, feel free to shout them out. Okay, let's see what this
I would
is.
guess it's some sort of island.
Okay, yeah, probably. Don't recognize.
That looks Asian in
Yeah,
sorts, and I would
definitely.
guess maybe Japanese or Philippine.
Yeah. Well, I don't think Filipino because that doesn't look like Tagalog, but
Yeah.
um, Japanese might be a good guess there. Although this would be Taiwan. I'm gonna guess Taiwan personally. We'll see. Who might be right? Okay, let's guess. Oh, Korea. Okay. Well, do one more round here. Okay, we got snow on the ground. It's really throwing us for a loop today because this is like the middle of nowhere. Let's see. Keep scrolling here.
It must be Korea, Korea, or South Korea, probably.
Well, this is a new location.
Oh,
Yeah. So each round gives you a new location. So this could be anywhere in the world. Sorry, I should have clarified that. Mm, man, this is they really are trying to stump us today. That's crazy. There's nothing out here. Uh, and normally, yeah, you would probably be able to figure this out um, with a lot more time, but unfortunately, this only gives you a 2 minute timer, and with very little information, it's going to be almost impossible to just figure out the exact location based on what we're given in this example, unfortunately. So there's not a very good example,
I was using Face Solid
unfortunately.
doing image search, like when you stop. So maybe we can try that. I know we only have about 30 seconds left, but taking like a static image, maybe like a screenshot and throwing it in Google
Yeah, you
or
potentially could for sure. And there are like AI image finders that can like assist in this kind of stuff too. Um, I've seen varying degrees of reliability on their use, unfortunately, but there are like AI detectors that can help in a lot of this stuff too. And I believe they are paid services. Let's see, where was this? Ooh, all the way in Finland, in northern Finland, very remote Finland. Uh, yeah, I don't know that I would have probably guessed that, but yeah, just it is a fun game to play. Um, as you can see, I probably need to play it a little bit more to hone my location guessing skills there. But we will move back to the presentation here. Ooh, let's see. Well, I believe that is pretty much all I have for you. If you have any questions, though, I'm more than willing to answer them. Hopefully, I can give you a good answer here. Listed all the sources, though, that I got a lot of this stuff from. And again, Bellingcat is a really, really good resource. and goes a lot more in depth with a lot of their guides. These are the very basics. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Maybe could you take us through, like, could you share your screen as you go through Bellingcat so we can kind of see what that looks like?
Yeah, sure. So let me switch screens here. Let's see. Let's share my screen. All right. Can you see my screen here?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So it is just spellingcat.com. If you look here, you can see um, all their stories. Uh, Again, here's even a good example of what we were talking about before is talking about metadata with file names, all that good stuff. Really, really good information to have. They even do their own workshops as well. But if you go here, go to guides, there's a whole lot of guides that you could use. Again, use talk about AI, the Shadow Finder tool, um, using all these different tools. They have pretty much everything you could possibly think of when it comes to OSINT. And it really, they are the original experts on this topic too. So, if you want to go really in depth, this is definitely a good place to start. So, any other questions? All right. Well, if nobody has any other questions,
Thank you, James, for your great presentations. Could you please tell us about the challenges of ethical and legal constraints of saints in the United States, particularly? What are the rules and requirements for these ethical and legal issues?
yeah. So, as far as the United States goes, there is no law prohibiting you from filming military movements in like public areas, right? Remember, I mentioned earlier that in Ukraine specifically, there is law in the books. You will get arrested if you post images online of military movements. But for like a public figure, it is not the same rules. So in the United States, the only rule that would be against that is that you can't film on an active military base. So military installations are definitely a bit of a different story, and they can at least detain you if you do film there. But like say if they were just traveling on the highway or this is any public person, you can film to your heart's content. Now, as long as it is in a public open space, right? So if it's in a private area, the laws are a bit different and it varies state by state. And there's laws against, it's called like two-party consent if you're like recording without their knowledge or something like that. It varies by state. Like the state I'm from, I believe you need another person's consent in order to record them in a private setting. Okay. So there is that. And as far as, searching somebody up online or trying to discover a location or anything like that, like, people post so much. Again, I've said this several times, but people post way more than they realize online. I could find somebody's address extremely easily just by knowing very, very basic information about them. And it's something we'll go over in the third workshop. But that's all considered publicly available information. You're not going to be breaking the law for finding this information. Now, what you could potentially be liable for um, legally, and don't quote me on this because I'm not a lawyer, but it's called um, what's the word I'm looking for here? Uh, there's a
Is it
specific word
doxing?
for, yeah, doxing. That's the word I'm looking for. So doxing is, I believe, illegal in some places, or could open you up to some sort of legal action. So if you publicly post somebody's information online, that could lead to legal action. But you know, if they're a public figure, it's a little bit different too. But say if you went online and posted my name, address, and I don't know, school schedule or something like that, could potentially open you up to legal action because I'm not considered a public figure. And there's a very um, famous example you could actually look up where not too long ago there was a student on Twitter who was actually showing Elon Musk's private jet and all the locations it was going, and Elon Musk actually sued him to stop doing that. And I don't exactly remember the results of the case, and again, you can look this up for yourself, but that's kind of a very popular example of OSINT 2. Um, He's basically just using publicly available information. There's two good websites, but the one that I could think of off the top of my head is Flight Radar 24, essentially tracking all the flights around the world. And basically, by writing a code to show every time Elon Musk's jet took off, he was able to locate where he was going at any given time. So that's another good example of that. And as far as ethical concerns, again, you know, when you're talking about a conflict, especially, you have to be very mindful of that. I mean, personally, I would have ethical concerns about posting military movements, especially if I'm posting the military movements of the country that I'm from. But there is certain things that you might want to post about in the sense like, say, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good example here, but Ukraine I've used as a popular example because that's probably the biggest story right now as far as where you would see that. So hopefully that answers your question. It is a very hot button issue in several countries, but and especially in countries where there isn't a very good protection for freedom of speech or for the media. Like OSINT is a fantastic tool, and unfortunately, uh, can get people in a lot of trouble in these countries too. And there's actually somebody we hope to have in the next workshop here, where we'll have a couple speakers, hopefully, where he ran into that exact issue. So hopefully that answers your question, though, if I saw.
Thank you so much, James. Could you please share your presentation if it's possible?
Yep. Yeah, we'll definitely do that at the end of this. I believe Sophia, are we going to send it out to everybody or um,
I think that's the plan. If you want to just throw it in the chat or attach it to the file, that might be a good double safe thing to do.
okay.
Just because I know Scott has the master list, so I don't want to say something that maybe isn't gonna happen. But
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
that's the plan.
Okay. 1 second. Let me see if I can share it in the chat. Are you able to share files in the chat like that? I don't think. Oh, wait. No, here we go. Okay, I see. Um, I don't know if you stopped recording, Sophie, but you probably can stop recording now too.